The void near Jupiter rippled like disturbed water, and reality itself seemed to hiccup as 2,000 Zeltharian warships tore through the fabric of space-time with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer through a wedding cake. The Grand Armada of the Zeltharian Empire had arrived, and oh boy, were they feeling confident. Fleet Admiral Crixtel stood on the command deck of the Imperial Dreadnought, Eternal Dominion, his 4 eyes gleaming with the kind of smug satisfaction usually reserved for people who've just cut in line and gotten away with it. His purple-scaled skin practically shimmered with anticipation as he gazed at the blue-green marble ahead. Earth. The third planet from an unremarkable yellow star. Target number 347 in the Empire's glorious expansion. This will be, what, an hour? 2 at most? Crixtel mused aloud, his mandibles clicking in what passed for a chuckle among his species. I might even make it back in time for the Emperor's banquet. Around him, the command deck buzzed with activity. Holographic displays showed the formation of the Armada in all its terrible glory. 2,000 ships. Capital ships the size of small moons. Frigates that could level continents. Fighter craft that outnumbered Earth's entire military aircraft by a factor of 50. The Zeltharian Empire didn't mess around when it came to subjugation. Why send 100 ships when you could send 2,000 and really make a point? Preliminary scans complete, Admiral, reported Subcommander Ven, his antennae twitching as he reviewed the data. The planet is divided into approximately 195 separate nation-states. Current technological level is primitive by galactic standards. They possess fission and fusion weapons, chemical propulsion, and basic satellite networks. No energy shields detected. No faster-than-light capability. No unified planetary defense grid. Crixtel's mandibles spread wider. It just kept getting better. Fragmented political systems? Still using combustion-based weapons? Oh, this is adorable. They're probably still arguing about whose turn it is to speak for the planet. Sir, we're detecting multiple languages, over 6,000 active military installations, and, Ven paused, his antennae drooping slightly, an unusually high number of weapons platforms for a pre-contact species. Compensating for their inadequacy with quantity, no doubt, Crixtel waved a dismissive claw. Proceed with standard first contact subjugation protocol. Broadcast the ultimatum. The communications array hummed to life, transmitting on every frequency Earth used. The message was simple, delivered in that special tone of condescension that only comes from an empire that's done this 346 times before. Attention, inhabitants of the planet you call Earth. You have been selected for integration into the Zeltharian Empire. You have one of your planetary rotations to surrender unconditionally. Failure to comply will result in systematic orbital bombardment until compliance is achieved. Resistance is futile. Your cooperation is mandatory. Have a pleasant day. Crixtel settled back into his command throne, already mentally composing his after-action report. Brief. Efficient. Utterly routine. Just another Tuesday, really, except it was actually a Keltharian workday, but the point stood. What the good Admiral didn't know, couldn't possibly have known, was that he had just made the single biggest tactical error in Zeltharian military history. He'd poked the bear. Except this wasn't just any bear. This was a bear that had spent the last 10,000 years inventing increasingly creative ways to destroy other bears, and had only recently run out of bears to fight. Humanity was about to remind the galaxy why some sleeping dogs should really, truly, be left the hell alone. The UN emergency session convened approximately 7 minutes after the Zeltharian ultimatum hit every screen, radio, and communication device on the planet. 7 minutes. That had to be some kind of record, considering the UN usually needed 3 weeks and 17 committee meetings just to decide on lunch catering. The General Assembly Hall erupted into what could charitably be described as organized chaos, and more accurately as a verbal demolition derby. Representatives shouted in 40 different languages simultaneously. The Russian delegate was arguing with the American delegate, which wasn't unusual, except they were actually agreeing with each other, which was unprecedented and frankly alarming. Ambassador Chen of the Pan-Asian Coalition, currently holding the rotating Security Council presidency through sheer cosmic coincidence, somehow managed to restore order by the simple expedient of muting everyone's microphone except her own. "Gentlemen, ladies, and representatives," she began, her voice carrying that special diplomatic calm usually reserved for hostage negotiations. "We have approximately," she checked her watch, 23 hours and 41 minutes to provide a response. "Might I suggest we stop screaming and start planning?" 47 minutes later, after the fastest consensus vote in UN history, Ambassador Chen transmitted Earth's official response. It was polite, professional, properly formatted according to diplomatic protocols humanity had developed over centuries of telling each other to politely go to hell. "Dear Fleet Admiral Krixtel and the Zeltharian Empire, we acknowledge receipt of your ultimatum. After careful consideration and unanimous agreement, Earth's response is as follows: no. We respectfully decline your offer of subjugation. We suggest you reverse course and depart our solar system immediately. We wish you safe travels. Sincerely, the United Nations of Earth." Off-camera, General Maria Rodriguez of the United Earth Defense Initiative, a command structure that had been created approximately 48 minutes ago, provided the less diplomatic commentary that truly captured humanity's sentiment. "Tell those purple bastards they can take their empire and shove it up their quantum drive exhaust port. All units, battle condition 1. Scramble everything. And someone get me the nuclear football. Actually, get me all the nuclear footballs. I want every silo hot, every sub deployed, and every pilot in the air. These idiots want a fight? Let's give them one they'll write cautionary tales about." Aboard the Eternal Dominion, Krixtel stared at the translated response with all four eyes blinking in asynchronous confusion. "They said no?" he repeated, as if speaking the words again might make them make sense. "They actually said no?" Sub-Commander Ven, run a historical search. When was the last time a pre-contact civilization rejected the Empire's terms? Ven's antennae twitched nervously. "Never, sir. In the entire documented history of the Empire, no species has ever refused initial subjugation terms. They either surrender immediately or last perhaps a few rotations before capitulating. They don't understand," Krixtel said, more to himself than anyone else. "They simply don't comprehend the galactic hierarchy. We're offering them mercy through immediate surrender, and they respond with this impertinence. Oh, they understood perfectly well, Admiral. They understood exactly what you were offering. The thing is, humanity had spent its entire existence being told what to do by emperors, kings, dictators, and divine right monarchs of every description. They developed a pretty standard response to such offers. It usually involved revolution, and it never ended well for the empire in question. Krixtel opened his well-worn copy of The Subjugation of Primitive Species, a field manual for imperial commanders, 9th edition, and turned to chapter 3 with the confidence of a man following a recipe he'd successfully made dozens of times before. Step 1, he read aloud: demonstrate overwhelming force through strategic bombardment of population centers. Target major cities to maximize psychological impact while minimizing actual resource damage. Primitive species typically surrender within 2 to 3 orbital bombardments. Weapons batteries, you are authorized to fire, Krixtel commanded, his voice carrying that special bureaucratic satisfaction of checking off a to-do list. The Zeltharian fleet opened up with plasma bombardments on 12 major Earth cities simultaneously. New York, Beijing, London, Moscow, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, Mumbai, Cairo, Sydney, Johannesburg, Mexico City, and Paris. The bright lances of superheated plasma streaked through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, except these stars brought fire and devastation instead of wishes. The impacts were catastrophic. Buildings vaporized. Infrastructure collapsed. The initial casualty estimates climbed into the hundreds of thousands within the first 30 minutes. Entire city blocks simply ceased to exist, replaced by glowing craters of molten glass and twisted metal. Krixtel watched the destruction with the detached professionalism of someone who'd seen it all before. Civilian communication networks should begin broadcasting surrender pleas within the next 10 minutes. Military command structures will fracture as regional governments attempt to negotiate separate peace terms. Standard pattern. By the manual. He waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then an hour. Instead of surrender pleas, Krixtel's communication officers began intercepting something else entirely. Emergency broadcasts. Military mobilization orders. Not from one government. Not from a regional alliance. From every single nation on Earth, simultaneously, coordinated through that ramshackle United Nations organization. Sir, Ven reported, his voice carrying a note of confusion that Krixtel had never heard before, we're detecting a unified military response. The fragmented nation-states are operating under a single command structure. All of them. Even the ones that were in active conflict with each other as of yesterday. That's not, Krixtel flipped through his manual frantically, that's not in the manual. They're supposed to fragment further under pressure, not unify. Check your sensors. This must be an error. But it wasn't an error. Down on Earth, something miraculous was happening. Something that thousands of years of human diplomacy, economics, shared culture, and idealistic rhetoric had failed to achieve. The Israeli Prime Minister was on a direct line with the Iranian president. The Indian and Pakistani generals were coordinating strike packages. North and South Korea had just merged their air forces. The United States and China had just signed a mutual defense pact that took approximately 4 minutes to negotiate, which was 4 minutes longer than it needed because both sides wanted to at least pretend there were diplomatic niceties involved. Krixtel had accomplished something no human leader in history had ever managed. He'd united every nation, every faction, every competing interest on Earth under a single banner with a single purpose. That purpose, translated into every Earth language simultaneously, could be summarized quite simply: let's kill these alien bastards. Congratulations, Admiral. You just gave humanity a common enemy. They'd been practicing for this moment for millennia. They'd just been practicing on each other because, until now, they didn't have anyone else to fight. That was about to change. The Empire had just introduced themselves as volunteer target practice. How thoughtful of them! The Zeltharian tactical computer had been programmed with combat data from over 400 primitive species encounters. It had algorithms for every known military doctrine, every strategic framework, every conceivable tactical response a pre-contact civilization might employ. What happened next did not compute. Literally. The tactical AI crashed 3 times in the first hour trying to classify what humanity was doing. Sir, enemy contacts launching from planetary surface, reported the sensors officer. Configuration does not match any known military vessel profile. That's because they weren't military vessels. They were weather satellites that some absolute madman had strapped rocket boosters and explosive payloads to. They were communication satellites with hastily welded-on railgun platforms. They were the International Space Station, which apparently someone had decided would make an excellent kinetic impactor if you just pointed it in the right direction and gave it a push. The satellites slammed into Zeltharian frigates with the grace of drunk bowling balls, but they hit hard enough to buckle shields and crack hulls. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't in any manual. It was effective. Detecting massive electromagnetic pulse from the planet's surface, Ven called out, his antennae practically vibrating with alarm. Multiple sources. Non-standard frequency distributions. Earth had just fired every EMP weapon they had, including several that had been classified as experimental and probably shouldn't be used near populated areas. The directed pulses washed over the lower Zeltharian formations like an invisible tsunami, frying sensors and shorting out shield generators. Then came the railguns. Humanity had been toying with electromagnetic mass drivers for decades, mostly for theoretical space launches and scientific research. Turns out, If you pump enough power through them and don't particularly care about the lifespan of the equipment, you can accelerate a telephone pole-sized tungsten rod to a significant fraction of light speed. Those rods punched through Zeltharian energy shields like they weren't even there, because the shields were designed to disperse energy weapons, not solid chunks of metal moving at relativistic velocities. It was the galactic equivalent of bringing a knife to a gunfight, except humanity had brought a knife to a gunfight and somehow managed to win by throwing the knife really, really hard. They're using kinetic weapons? Crixtel sputtered. Those are obsolete. No one uses physical projectiles anymore. The weapons appear to be extremely effective against our shielding, sir, Ven observed with what might have been the understatement of the century. Then things got really weird. Civilian spacecraft, everything from mining vessels to tourist shuttles, came screaming out of Earth's orbital facilities on what could only be described as suicide runs. Except they weren't crewed. Humanity had loaded them with every explosive they could pack into the cargo holds, pointed them at Zeltharian capital ships, and set the autopilot to ram. Who fights like this? Crixtel demanded. Where is the formation integrity? Where is the strategic doctrine? This is chaos. Commander Okoye of the Nigerian Space Force would have been happy to explain, if she weren't currently too busy cutting through the hull of a Zeltharian destroyer with a plasma torch. Her team of 40 Marines had hijacked a supply shuttle, disabled its transponder, and simply flown it straight into the destroyer's hangar bay while pretending to be a damaged friendly vessel. The Zeltharians, who apparently had never heard of the Trojan horse, let them right in. What followed was a masterclass in guerrilla warfare adapted for zero gravity. Hit and run attacks through the corridors. Improvised explosives in critical junctions. Humanity had spent centuries perfecting the art of asymmetric warfare, and it translated beautifully to ship-boarding actions. Their fighting style makes no tactical sense, reported a Zeltharian squad leader before his communication cut off abruptly, terminated by a shotgun blast. Because yes, humanity had brought shotguns to a space battle. Shotguns loaded with armor-piercing slugs worked wonderfully in ship corridors. The Zeltharian tactical manual had chapters on honorable combat, strategic formations, and proper military engagement protocols. Humanity's approach to warfare could be summarized much more simply: if it's stupid but it works, it isn't stupid. Now someone strap rockets to that bus and point it at their command ship. The Zeltharians fought by the rules of civilized galactic warfare, humanity fought to win. There's a significant difference between those two philosophies, and the Empire was learning it the hard way, one improvised weapon at a time. Subcommander Ven had made a terrible mistake. In his quest to understand the enemy's incomprehensible tactics, he'd done something no Zeltharian intelligence officer had bothered to do before attacking a primitive world. He'd actually read their history, all of it. His antennae drooped lower with each passing hour as he absorbed the databanks humanity had so helpfully uploaded to their various internet archives. When he finally looked up from his console, his scales had gone from purple to a sickly gray-green color that among his species indicated existential dread. Admiral, Ven's voice cracked slightly. I need to show you something. About Earth. About humans. Crixtel, currently watching casualty reports climb to levels that should have been impossible for a primitive species to inflict, turned irritably. What is it, Sub-Commander? I'm somewhat occupied with managing this unexpected resistance. Ven pulled up a holographic timeline. Sir, in the last 3,000 Earth years, they have fought approximately 15,000 documented wars. With themselves. They have never known a period longer than a few decades without major armed conflict somewhere on their planet. They don't have a word for peace that doesn't imply a temporary state between wars. So they're violent. We knew this. It's why they need the Empire's civilizing influence. Sir, you don't understand. Ven's voice was taking on a hysterical edge. Every major technological advancement they've made came from military application. Powered flight? Developed to drop explosives on each other. Nuclear fission? Weaponized before it was used for power generation. Rocket propulsion? Started as ballistic missiles. The global communication network we're intercepting? Originally a military project designed to survive nuclear war. They have turned everything, and I mean everything, into a weapon at some point in their history. Crixtel felt something cold settle in his primary stomach. Surely you're exaggerating. They have over 200 words in their various languages for different types of killing, Ven continued, pulling up a linguistic analysis. War, battle, skirmish, conflict, engagement, siege, raid, assault, invasion, ambush, and that's just in one language. They have separate terms for wars based on duration, scale, and methodology. They study ancient battles the way we study poetry. They teach their children military history as a core educational subject. The hologram shifted to show historical footage. Humans in primitive armor hacking at each other with metal blades. Humans in trenches firing chemical-propelled projectiles. Humans deploying atomic weapons on their own cities. Humans launching satellites specifically designed to drop tungsten rods from orbit. They've been practicing warfare against themselves for their entire existence, Ven said quietly. We're not fighting a primitive species, sir. We're fighting a species that has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing, and they only just now got an external target. The casualty counter ticked upward again. The Empire had lost 43 ships in the last 2 hours. 43 ships against a species that shouldn't have been able to damage one. Crixtel's mandibles trembled as he watched another destroyer disappear from the tactical display, victim of what the humans called a nuclear-pumped grazer, which was apparently what happened when you detonated an atomic bomb specifically to channel its energy into a directed radiation beam. They'd invented it 30 years ago and classified it as too dangerous to deploy. They were deploying it now. Open a priority channel to Imperial Command, Crixtel ordered, his voice hollow. Request immediate reinforcement. Full battle fleet. And send a priority warning to the subjugation database. What should the warning say, sir? Crixtel looked at the blue-green planet that was systematically dismantling his armada with weapons that ranged from cutting-edge physics to literally just throwing heavy objects really fast. Mark Sol 3 as a level 9 threat. Do not engage without overwhelming force. Population has militarized their entire civilization. Tactics are unpredictable, ruthlessly efficient, and utterly without regard for conventional warfare protocols. He paused. And add a note, they seem to be enjoying this. Because that was the truly terrifying part. The intercepted communications from human military channels weren't filled with fear or desperation. They were filled with phrases like, finally, a real challenge, and, someone get me more ammunition, I'm having too much fun. Humanity hadn't just been preparing for war their entire existence, that they'd been waiting for it, and the Zeltharian Empire had just volunteered to be their sparring partner. Somewhere in the cosmos, Darwin himself was probably laughing. Crixtel did what any commander does when facing unexpected resistance. He threw his best troops at the problem and hoped it would go away. The Imperial Guard, the elite of the elite, dropped from hyperspace in their sleek black warships. These weren't conscripts or regular fleet personnel. These were soldiers who had trained for decades, equipped with the finest weapons the Empire could produce, veterans of 100 subjugation campaigns. They lasted approximately 4 hours before humanity reminded them that experience means nothing when your opponent rewrites the rules mid-game. Dr. Jennifer Park, head of DARPA's, technically we're not supposed to have this division, had spent the last 2 weeks doing something that should have been impossible. Her team had taken captured Zeltharian plasma weapons, torn them apart, figured out how they worked, and then made them better. The problem with their design, Dr. Park explained to no one in particular as she calibrated the new weapon system, is that they optimized for energy efficiency. We optimized for making things very, very dead. The human plasma cannons drew 3 times the power, had half the lifespan, and generated heat that would have made a responsible engineer weep. They also hit with enough force to punch clean through Imperial Guard shields like tissue paper. Responsible engineering was for peacetime. This was war. Meanwhile, in a converted cargo facility in Singapore, another team of engineers was performing what could only be described as aggressive reverse engineering. They'd captured a Zeltharian frigate mostly intact, and humanity's response to alien technology was refreshingly straightforward: take it apart, figure out how it works, steal the good bits. "We got their shield generators working," reported the lead engineer with barely contained glee. "Installation on our capital ships begins in 6 hours. 6 hours. The Zeltharians had taken 2 centuries to develop that technology. Humanity had cracked it in 3 weeks using nothing but stubbornness, coffee, and a complete disregard for safety protocols. Above Earth's atmosphere, Captain Michelle Dubois led her fighter squadron in an attack pattern that would have looked very familiar to World War II pilots. The Immelmann turn, the Thatch weave, the Booman zoom, all translated beautifully into three-dimensional space combat. The Zeltharian fighter pilots, trained in modern energy-efficient combat maneuvers, found themselves consistently outmaneuvered by tactics that were literally centuries old. There's something deeply embarrassing about being shot down by the aerospace equivalent of a history lesson, but the Empire was landing hits too. Rio de Janeiro was a crater. Jakarta was burning. Melbourne had been evacuated. The casualties on both sides were climbing into the millions. This wasn't the clean, quick subjugation Krixtel had planned. This was a meat grinder, and both sides were being fed into it.in his command chamber. Krixtel stared at a weapons authorization code he'd never thought he'd have to enter. The Planet Killer Torpedo. Forbidden by 18 galactic treaties, considered a war crime by every civilized species, capable of cracking a planet's crust and rendering it uninhabitable for millennia. "Sir, you can't be serious," Ven whispered, seeing the code displayed on the Admiral's private screen. The Emperor himself signed the Planetary Preservation Accords. Using that weapon would mean court-martial, execution, your entire lineage dishonored. "Better dishonored than dead," Krixtel muttered, his claw hovering over the authorization button. That he didn't know that humanity had already detected the planet killer weapon, had run simulations on its capabilities, and had come to a very simple conclusion: if the Empire was willing to destroy Earth, then humanity was perfectly willing to ensure every single Zeltharian ship died with them. Mutually assured destruction. Humanity had invented the concept, perfected it, and spent 50 years living with their finger on the button. They weren't afraid of it, they were old friends. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's response to surrender or die had a third option: if we're going down, we're taking you with us. It wasn't a particularly sane option, but then again, nobody had ever accused humanity of being particularly sane. Operation Broken Crown launched at 0400 hours Earth Standard Time, and it was everything humanity did best wrapped into one absolutely insane plan. "All units, this is command," General Rodriguez's voice crackled across every human military channel. "You know the target. You know the stakes. Show these Imperial idiots why you don't pick a fight with Earth. Execute, execute, execute." The operation was simple in concept, utterly bonkers in execution. Every human asset, every ship, every weapon platform, every half-functional satellite with a rocket strapped to it, launched a coordinated assault on one target: the Empire's command carriers. Cut off the head, the body dies. Humanity had learned that lesson from every successful revolution in their history, but the real genius wasn't the frontal assault. That was just the distraction. While Zeltharian point defense systems were busy tracking incoming missiles and kamikaze drones, humanity deployed its secret weapon, malware. The Zeltharians had never encountered computer viruses. Why would they? Their society was hierarchical, orderly, civilized. The concept of deliberately creating software designed to corrupt and destroy other software was alien to them. It was chaos. It was sabotage. It was dishonorable. IT was also incredibly effective. Human hackers, the same ones who'd spent years creating and fighting viruses for everything from pranks to corporate espionage, had been given a new target: Zeltharian ship networks. The viruses slipped through communication channels, hitched rides on sensor sweeps, and infiltrated through every captured system humanity had reverse engineered. Shield generators flickered. Weapons targeting went haywire. Life support started playing Earth's death metal at maximum volume through internal speakers, because some hacker thought it would be funny. "Sir, we've lost primary systems," Ven reported, panic finally cracking through his professional demeanor. "Secondary systems are corrupted. Tertiary backups are displaying something called memes. I don't understand what that means." While the Zeltharian fleet descended into technological chaos, Colonel Kenji Nakamura led 300 Marines in the largest boarding action in human history. 50 teams, 50 ships, one objective: capture every flag officer in the Imperial command structure. They breached the Eternal Dominion's hull using shaped charges that had been manufactured in a Detroit factory approximately 9 hours earlier. Humanity's industrial capacity, normally devoted to producing consumer goods and arguing about economic systems, had been fully converted to war production. If you could make cars, you could make bombs. If you could make smartphones, you could make guidance computers. If you could make kitchen appliances, you could apparently make hull-breaching equipment. Nakamura's team swept through the flagship with the efficiency of a SWAT team and the ruthlessness of people defending their only home. They'd studied the captured Zeltharian ship layouts. They knew where the command deck was. Krixtel barely had time to reach for his sidearm before a flashbang grenade turned his world into white noise and spinning stars. When his vision cleared, he was staring at a human in combat armor, weapon pointed directly at his primary head. "Fleet Admiral Krixtel, I presume?" Colonel Nakamura's voice was eerily calm through his helmet speakers. "You're under arrest for war crimes, unauthorized military aggression, and really terrible tactical planning. You have the right to shut up. I suggest you exercise it." The mighty Zeltharian armada, the pride of the Empire, the unstoppable force that had conquered 346 worlds, had just been decapitated by a species that had invented cyber warfare because their teenagers got bored. The hunter had become the hunted, and humanity was just getting started. The remaining Zeltharian ships fled Earth's solar system with all the dignity of a cat that had just lost a fight with a ceiling fan. 40% of the Grand Armada limped back to Imperial space, their hulls scarred, their crews traumatized, and their pride absolutely demolished. Krixtel, now a prisoner aboard his own flagship which was being gleefully piloted by humans who kept making inappropriate jokes about the engine design, was forced to transmit his report to the Emperor via human-controlled communications. "Your Imperial Majesty," Krixtel began, his voice carrying the hollow tone of a military career circling the drain, "I regret to inform you that the subjugation of Sol 3, designated Earth, has failed catastrophically. Total casualties: 1,200 ships destroyed, 398 captured, 42,000 personnel killed, 71,000 captured. Enemy casualties are significant but they remain combat effective and highly motivated. Recommendation: do not engage this species again. Ever. Under any circumstances. Perhaps send a gift basket and apologize profusely." The Emperor's response was not recorded for posterity, mostly because it consisted of 17 minutes of screaming in 3 different languages. Earth hadn't escaped unscathed. 12 major cities were heavily damaged or destroyed. Casualty estimates topped 4 million. Orbital infrastructure was shredded. Economic losses would take decades to recover from, but they'd won. Against a galactic empire with technology centuries ahead of them, humanity had fought them to a standstill and then beaten them back. The galactic community, which had been watching the invasion with the detached interest of reality TV viewers, suddenly got very quiet. Emergency sessions were convened. Diplomatic channels lit up. First contact protocols were hastily rewritten. Within a month, the Galactic Council had passed Resolution 8472, unofficially known as the Sol System Accord and more commonly referred to as that place where we don't go. Article 1 was refreshingly straightforward. Sol 3, designated Earth, is hereby classified as a prohibited contact zone. Military engagement is forbidden. Trade negotiations may proceed only with extreme caution and overwhelming politeness. Seriously, just leave them alone. The Zeltharian Empire, humiliated on a galactic stage, quietly removed Eternal Dominion from its list of active ship names and struck Sol 3 from all future expansion plans. Earth, meanwhile, had gained something more valuable than victory, a reputation, and the galaxy's undivided attention. Former Fleet Admiral Crixtel, now sanitation technician 3rd Class Crixtel, pushed his cleaning cart through the Imperial Palace's lower corridors and contemplated the life choices that had led him here. His uniform had been replaced with a jumpsuit. His command staff had been replaced with a mop. His grand military career had been replaced with toilet duty. The Emperor had been very clear: execution was too merciful. Crixtel would live a long life thinking about his failures while scrubbing floors. Meanwhile, back on Earth, humanity was doing what humanity does best when given new toys: taking them apart, making them better, and mass-producing them with terrifying efficiency. The captured Zeltharian ships had been reverse-engineered so thoroughly that human vessels now sported hybrid technology that made galactic engineers weep into their equivalent of coffee. Faster-than-light drives. Energy shields. Plasma weapons. All stamped with "Made on Earth" and improved with that special human touch of "let's see what happens if we turn this up to 11. The first human colony ship, christened the Consequences of Your Actions, departed for Alpha Centauri with a hold full of eager colonists and enough weapons to fight off a small invasion fleet. Because humanity had learned an important lesson: the galaxy wasn't safe, so bring guns. Lots of guns. Galactic trade routes suddenly developed interesting detours around the Sol system. Ships that previously cut through human space now added weeks to their journey just to avoid any possibility of contact. The few brave or desperate enough to open trade negotiations with Earth did so with the kind of careful politeness usually reserved for handling live explosives. The Galactic Council's diplomatic corps developed an unofficial motto: be nice to the humans. They have our stuff now and they know how to use it. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges were established. Humanity joined the galactic community not as subjects or supplicants, but as equals who'd earned their seat at the table through the time-honored method of making anyone who disagreed regret their life choices. The galaxy learned a valuable lesson, one that would be taught in every military academy, every strategic planning session, every first contact protocol briefing for the next 1,000 years. Humans are the species you trade with, not the species you invade. They've spent 10,000 years fighting each other for practice. They've turned warfare into an art form, a science, and occasionally a spectator sport. They have words for types of violence that don't exist in most languages. They consider mutually assured destruction a viable negotiating tactic, and most importantly, they really don't like being told what to do. The Zeltharian Empire had learned this lesson the hard way. They'd attacked Earth expecting an easy victory, a quick subjugation, another number on their list of conquered worlds. Instead, they'd gotten a black eye, a military disaster, and a permanent entry in the "Mistakes We Will Never Make Again" manual. Crixtel scrubbed another floor and tried not to think about the fact that his greatest military achievement was now used as a training example titled, "How Not to Conduct an Invasion, a Cautionary Tale." Somewhere above him, in the palace's diplomatic wing, the Emperor was signing a formal peace treaty with Earth's ambassador, agreeing to terms that included reparations, technology sharing, and a very sincere apology. And somewhere in the Sol system, General Rodriguez looked at the fleet of human warships now patrolling Earth's space, smiled, and sent a message to the Galactic Council: Earth is open for business. We accept trade agreements, diplomatic relations, and cultural exchanges. We do not accept ultimatums, threats, or uninvited military visits. Management reserves the right to refuse service and deploy overwhelming force. Have a nice day. The message was polite, professional, and carried an unspoken addendum that every species in the galaxy understood perfectly: try us again. We dare you. Nobody tried them again. Turns out, picking a fight with humanity was a mistake you only made once. If you survived to learn the lesson, the moral of the story? When you encounter a species that spent its entire existence perfecting the art of creative violence, maybe don't wake them up and make them angry. The galaxy is a big place. There's plenty of room to just go around the murder apes and let them do their thing. The Zeltharian Empire learned this lesson at the cost of 60% of their fleet, consider it tuition in the School of Hard Knocks, with humanity as the professor emeritus of Find Out After You Mess Around. Class dismissed.